everyone. Well, I'm excited about my panel that I have right here. Of course, you just recently met Shannon and Jeff, so let me also introduce you to Kyle Prohaska of Praise Pictures and Wes and Adam Llewellyn from 4L Films. And right now... What, Wes and Amanda, excuse me.
It's not Wes and Adam.
Well, yes.
That's a different show.
Yes, yeah. You thought we're here to talk about films. But,
surprise.
I definitely, we're going to talk more with y'all in detail about what y'all do later. But I wanted to gather us all together on, because, sometimes the group discussions, see where they go. And I wanted to talk about, Christians in the industry. Actually, let's talk about one thing is we all happen to be local guys. We're all from the Atlanta area. Well, I should say we all live in the Atlanta area. We're not from there. So that's what I wanted to bring up. Jeff, I know when we first met, we had a common, I'm sorry, Shannon, I'm just like, we had a common story of when, felt to be, to go into the industry. My initial thought was, well, I got to leave Atlanta because if I want to make a living here, a living as an actor, Atlanta's not the place to be. But remarkably, it is becoming that place. Right. You're actually showing now how you can make a living as an actor. It's almost solely, it is what you do, right? There is no day job for Jeff.
That's when I really considered myself a professional, when I was able to support my family in this business and not have to have a second job.
Yeah.
So I'm blessed. I give God all the glory.
Yeah. So what do you think is calling people this way? Particularly, I would love for y'all to answer that, since that's exactly, you just recently moved here, and you two have been here, well, just for a year now.
A little over a year.
Yeah. What called you from going from Los Angeles to here?
Oh gosh, the honest answer is we were actually at her mother's down in South Georgia, and I was driving back from Walmart. So I was thinking, how more southern can you get? And I know it wasn't, because we tend to romanticize places. And it was June, it was hot, it was humid, there were bugs.
Gnats all over the place, yes.
Everything I hate about the South. I love the South, except for those few things. I really do.
Well, you don't like 90% of your
Yeah. But I was driving back, and it was one of those handful of times in my life I heard God quite clear, and he said, I want you to move to Atlanta. And he actually said, I want you to move to Atlanta and make films with your friend Jeff.
Wow.
Of course, I'm like, did he say Jeff Rose?
Yeah. Jeff's a common name. Yeah.
Do I have to audition?
but at that point, I'd been living in Los Angeles for 17 years. He'd been living in Los Angeles for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I stayed a little longer, and he said, well, let's see if there's a place for us to live in Atlanta. And I found the place that we're living in right now, and we literally packed up and moved within a month. That was the end of June, and we were here August 4th.
It was one of those things, we didn't plan it, but our lease on our office was ending, our lease on our apartment was ending. I mean, there were like lease on so many little things were ending the next month.
Yeah.
And we would have to renew, our car renewal was ending the next month even. I mean, it was just like all these things were closing for us without us doing a thing. And to be quite honest, we didn't really realize how the industry was booming here as much as it had. I mean, we had come out, I think, a year earlier and met with Jeff. I knew Jeff in Los Angeles. We were good friends there. And Jeff had moved back, and we hadn't seen each other for almost 10 years. We'd stayed in communication, but hadn't seen each other. And we came out, and I said, Atlanta's great, but it's not for us. It's not for us.
6 months, 8 months later, we've moved.
Yeah.
That was almost a year before, and then God basically said, I want you to move to Atlanta. So it was, us crazy Christians, that's, we're the ones that always do things like that. It's like God says, go.
God says do it, and it's better not to argue.
Yeah. Amen to that. Kyle, how about you? What drove you here?
Really, it just kind of job second and family first. I don't have a lot of family down here. My wife's sister is here, but just feel like a place where we would want to raise a family over where we were, which was up north.
Yeah.
Wanted to get away from the weather, wanted to get away from some of the things that aren't so nice up there. So that was the main reason for us to come, but being in Atlanta and the Atlanta area is a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Wow. There's just, I grew up in a town with one stoplight, less than 1,500 people, So not exactly the best place to be doing these things. So having a greater resource available, just the huge city, all the people, just everything that's there, it's going to help from this point forward. So.
Now, going on the spiritual side of things, I find it interesting that, as I said, when I became an actor, immediately my thought was, okay, leave. And I did. I lived in New York. But it's interesting when I open up the show talking about that there seems to be a trend of Christians are picking up the torch. Not only are we seeing more Christian films as Facing the Giants now with Courageous coming out and Suing the Devil, but we're also seeing a lot more Christians, open Christians in the industry. I find it interesting how the buckle of the Bible Belt is starting slowly to become a third, if not second, Hollywood. Do you think, is that just simple coincidence? What do you feel, from that?
But it's a number of things. I mean, it's in God's providential care, He has this thing called tax incentives.
Absolutely.
And honestly, I don't think it's not an uninspired thing. I really do. I think it's one of those things where it's of a great economic benefit to those people, so that God can bless people economically, but it also then provides an atmosphere for creating your own product here, keeping the talent here, keeping the production here, and actually growing products in the Atlanta area or in Georgia or in the South, and I think the incentives have had a lot to do with that. But I think that we have the opportunity to kind of go to the next level and actually take the industry and have it come here and have all of its needs met, so that they're not importing so many people.
And the technology has changed so incredibly in the last 10 years. I know when we did The Moment After, we did it for what then was a shoestring, and we shot on film because that's what you had then. And I think 80% of our budget, 80% of our budget went to film and processing. Wow. And now and now it's you can shoot so inexpensively, and you can edit on your laptop.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just what you can do now with the technology is just
it would be a
exploding.
sin not to be. For those of us inclined to get into this business, it would be a sin not to be doing what we're doing.
There's no excuses anymore.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Now. But one thing I definitely want to talk about, I'm not sure if we're going to have time, is the quality, though. Talking about, raising the bar and, making things better, because everyone now has access to the cameras and the laptops.
I've always said that I always say is the greatest thing about the technology is that anyone can afford it. Mm-hmm. The worst thing about the technology is that anyone can afford it.
That's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's one thing that the Lord's been sharing with us is that one of the reasons He brought us here was to start training people, teaching people, is that the quality has to come up. There's such a witness in the quality of our work.
Amen.
Yeah,
I mean, there's such a strong witness where we always say the thing isn't to go out and beat on the goats and get them to come over. It's that we, as sheep, have such wonderful food that the goats are going, hey, what are they eating?
Got to get there.
I want to get some of that.
Exactly. And I had a friend of mine say one time that, when Christians do it well, it's done great, it's done right. Again, going back to, some of the great Christian films that are Academy Award-winning pictures, such as, Ben-Hur and Ten Commandments and Chariots of Fire, and
which weren't Christian films; they were secular films.
That's absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, some of these great Academy films are not Christian films, but they're Christian stories, like this one right here, The Machine Gun Preacher. Now, it's interesting that I discovered there's a little bit of controversy going on with this film, because, it's a story of a man who, comes with redemption, who becomes saved, and they don't shy away from that. Even the trailer right there showed him being baptized, and he goes and builds a church in Sudan. Now, I mean, incredibly story. But with the beginning, it's showing his real pre-Christ self. He's cussing, he's drinking, he's fighting. There's violence. You saw some of it right there. And so I'm shocked to find that there's people who are shunning this film because of that. Because it's got a great message, but there's violence in it, and there's cussing and stuff like that. What's your reaction to that? Kind of as you said earlier, with throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
What?
Have they
How
read
do you
the
feel?
Old Testament?
Exactly. If someone gave us $200 million to make all 66 books of the Bible and bring it to life the way God inspired those authors to write it, guess what? It'll be rated XXX. Okay, let's think about it.
Yeah.
Think of the even forget about the sexual things that go on. Even if you just talk about the gore and the violence and all that, that would definitely push it over the top. Well, I've got no problem with going there. That makes a film more powerful. And for me personally, again, no disrespect for any of our mutual friends who are filmmakers, Christian filmmakers, but I have been more inspired in great ways in my life by movies like Braveheart than I have been anything that is in the Christian realm. And I mean inspired as a Christian and as a believer by those types of films. So
You mean except for our film?
absolutely. I no doubt about that. No. But and I would venture to say that none of the filmmakers that are all our friends who make the Christian movies, there's not many of them, if not all of them, who weren't inspired by movies like Braveheart themselves.
Well, I'm kind of laughing at thinking back when I was a kid and in Sunday school at my nice little Southern Baptist church, and you learn about David and Goliath, and you learn that David killed Goliath with the slingshot. But it's funny that they conveniently stopped the story right there, and I didn't learn that David cuts off Goliath's head until I was well into an adult. I mean,
Censors have been around for a long time.
Yeah. Even in Sunday school with the Bible, there's censorship.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, could you tell the story of Constantine? I mean, the Emperor Constantine. Could you tell the story of a lot of people who have had dramatic changes in their lives when they're confronted with the truth of Christ? Are you have to take them as an individual experience, and not everybody is going to like your movie no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So you have to decide, what is the story that God wants me to tell? How am I going to tell it? How am I going to get it out to market so other people will enjoy the story and get something from it? And then you have to make those decisions. But it's really kind of interesting that a lot of times most Christian films are not really embraced by the Christian audience, and I just think that's really kind of funny to me. Well, why not?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with a faith issue. It's like sometimes they'll laugh at a joke on Saturday night, but you can't tell the same joke on Sunday morning.
Right. Christians are very, very particular. We have a good friend that's a Christian comedian. He said, you can see the same crowd in the club, comedy club on Saturday night, and say a joke. They'll laugh. You say it on Sunday morning, and they're all shocked.
And you could have the same people there at
That's
the
what
church.
I'm saying. Same crowd, same crowd
the
on
exact
mornings,
same people.
and it's just
Yeah.
we tend to we're in church now. Let's act churchly.
And talking about on that same note, though, what is why is it that Christian films, and when I say Christian, I mean generically, putting this Machine Gun Preacher in that category, why don't they do better than they do?
I think a lot of it has to do with what the audience demands. We had some friends of ours that actually made a really great film several years ago, and they kind of walked the line between secular film and some secular themes and things, and also a very strong Christian message within the film. And it didn't do really well in either market, which was a shame because this was actually very well done film. Well, it was too Christian for the non-Christians, and it wasn't Christian enough for the Christians. And so, you have these two markets, and people who do inspirational films are kind of stuck, wanting to be able to tell the full story, but realizing, well, I've got to market to somebody.
Yeah.
But that's not just Christian and
Yeah, that's not
non-Christian.
just
That's also horror film drama. You can't. that's why so many films you find them and they go, wow, that was a good film. Why did it flop? And you realize that, well, it was kind of a action drama film, and nobody knew how to market it. So a lot of it comes down to just business. They want to market to the Christians. They want to market to the non-Christians. I know that it has exploded in Hollywood, this Christian market, and so many times they don't quite understand us. They don't quite get us, and they don't realize that we're one group, yet we're totally divided. Yeah. And they go, well, we said God a lot. Yeah, but you didn't say God in the right way, or you didn't say it.
But they're learning.
Yeah. And you can,
they're learning.
But they do, I think, Hollywood speaks well with money. They know, they're seeing it's making, that it's making money. Yeah. So, okay, we can do Christian films too. And then they, turn around and come out with, what was that Noah movie with John Voight, the TV movie? And it was an absolute flop because it seriously, it seemed like a bunch of people who've never been to Sunday school trying to tell the story of Noah. And as Christians, we were like, okay, that's not what happened, and it was an absolute flop. But what is, on that note, though, I think it's very important as those who are watching, those who aren't called necessarily to be in the industry, but are looking at the TV or the movies saying, I wish there was something better, you have to vote with your dollars. You have to get up and go to the theater when you see there's a good, positive Christian movie out there. Because if you don't go, that's as good as saying not having anything at all. Right. Going from the conversation that we were talking about, I feel like there's an obvious rise, I think, in Christian film and Christian filmmakers. And even on the Hollywood side, they saw Passion of the Christ. They saw Facing the Giants and said, hey, there's money to be made. And I think that's what Hollywood speaks. But what then can we do to grab that mantle and not lose it? Because I look at, what we said earlier, that because equipment and everything is so cheap, anyone can do a film, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. Because one problem I think I've found with Christian films is that label right there, Christian films. I've got friends personally that I know who didn't go see Fireproof or Facing the Giants just simply because it was a Christian film. And they said, it's going to be stupid. I'm not going to see that. So what is, as filmmakers, what is our calling to do better to make sure that we can grab this torch and hold on to it?
I think there's a pro and a con with that. I remember I had a young man come up to me one time. He'd seen my films, and he said, well, aren't you preaching to the choir? Mm-hmm. And I kind of looked at him and said, no, actually, I'm feeding the sheep. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's two ways to look at it. Yes, people say, well, aren't you just, doing the same thing, preaching the same thing? It's like, yeah, but Christians need entertainment too. These are our stories. I was watching Kyle's film, and it touched me, and I caught myself, yes, I did, I caught myself crying. And I was touched. But I mean, I was looking at that, and it made me start thinking that probably a non-Christian wouldn't cry at that moment, but for me, seeing a man, an actor, and I knew he was an actor, I knew he was performing, but the most wonderful moment in a person's life accepting Christ. And that was touching to me. That made me cry. And that's something that may not touch other people, but it's in the same way, if, some people like romantic films, and some people don't. Yeah. But it's because what they like. And I think as Christians, if we enjoy those films, there's nothing wrong with it.
I think the excellence bar is the other thing. It's like, okay, so you have this equipment that's available to you. You have these people that are just dying to volunteer and come and work on your project. But you then have to look at what's selling in Hollywood, what is selling to the general public, and then you have to say, my stuff has got to at least look in the same ballpark as what I'm seeing on TV or what I'm seeing in the movie theater.
At least.
At least.
I think the bar should be higher.
Yeah, it should be higher.
But when you're starting out and you don't know anything, and a lot of these people, Jesus is going to teach me everything I need to know about filmmaking. Well, what they don't realize, it may take them 17 years.
Yeah.
And they're still learning.
Yeah.
Ignoring knowledge that's clearly available to you in books and other people that may be out there doing it, whether they're a Christian or not, is foolish.
Yeah. And Christians that get in the business, too, that think they have to change the way the business works. There's a reason departments exist, a reason things work the way it does. We don't need to fix the way filmmaking happens. And a lot of Christians jump into the business with that eager attitude, thinking they've got to change all that. No, we've just got to bring the Holy Spirit into the process that already works perfectly well, fine and good.
One of the things we've come to realize is people kept talking about, Hollywood is evil, Hollywood is evil. It's like, no, Hollywood is not evil. Hollywood is a machine. It's simply a machine. It's neither good nor bad. It's a big business town that makes movies. And like I said, Sony is distributing my 2 features, and Sony is distributing those features because they want to share the message of Christ around the world. Not. They want to make money. But fine, in the process of that happening, the message of Christ is being shared. So it is a business. They're neither good nor bad. They're as happy to distribute my film and make money off of that as they are any other film. It's a business. And I get so tired of hearing Christians say, we're going to remake Hollywood. Why? It's a business. It works. Just do it. Be a part of it. You're part of the business, but do it to glorify God.
In Christian films, the purpose is to bring hope to people. And because I get so many emails, and I bet you do too, and you probably do as well, that it is bringing marriages restored, hope that they didn't think there was hope. And I get that every single week just from one film. And that film, definitely, there's a lot of amateurs in that, and we didn't know what we were doing. That's where it falls back to what I said, that God can do whatever he wants, anytime he wants, anywhere he wants. It's to bring hope. No, we don't stay where we are. We have to rise up. We have to. But there's a need for it.
There absolutely is. And going back to, we walk a fine line on, we want to share Christ. We want to bring hope. But if we want our films to reach the mass market, to bring that hope in there, we also have to prove to them that it'll make money. Because that is, because I fully agree with you that Hollywood's not the only agenda Hollywood has is to make money.
If your demographic is over 10, there's one bottom line. I don't care what your film is about, what your story is, whatever. Audiences want a good story. Period.
Well,
that's it.
I do.
To clarify what I was saying, it's the people behind the machine that have agendas. And that's why I say Hollywood is simply a machine. Everybody has an agenda. Even as Christians going out there, we have an agenda, which is fine. So I guess what I'm saying is Hollywood is just the machine. It's the people that are there. And that's where our philosophy has always come from, is if you want to change Hollywood, you don't criticize it, you don't protest, you don't get out and picket signs. You touch the lives of the people who make the films. You change the people, you'll change the films.
Which gets back to what we talked about earlier, that those relationships behind the scenes are so vital. That's I mean, I've been able to do more good for the kingdom behind the camera than I have in front of the camera. And I've got great aspirations and been able to accomplish great things, like Shannen mentioned a moment ago. The choir is hurting. Sometimes the choir needs being preached to. There's nothing wrong with that, So we've got basically what it is, because the Lord is behind it. We've got an infinite number of ways we can go. Why are we trying to pigeonhole everything and put these square pegs into round holes? And what an incredible! It's a blessing. It's a huge blessing.
I would just say, if you're going out there, so many churches have taken from what you guys did down south of here, and tried to make a film, and all I can say is, if God is in it, if God is behind it, you will succeed. If he's not, I don't care what it is. If it's building a new building, making a film, don't do it, because it will fail.
And that gets back to what Kyle was saying earlier about learning the business. Don't just think, okay, I've got an idea and I'm going to go do it. You've got to.
It is a business.
It is,
and it's something that it's a complex, finicky, fickle business that it's not easy to navigate. It's really difficult to get into and have a complete understanding of what it is that you're getting into. I mean, Wes and I are still learning. I've been in the entertainment industry since I was a child, and it's like I understand the complexity of it. And so I think a lot of times when people want to get in, they're not realizing this is not like any other business. It's so people oriented. It's so connection oriented.
So many subtleties with dealing with people and how to deal with them.
The hardest thing in the world is making a real movie, but the most difficult thing in the world is not making one for people like us who've been inspired to do it. And somebody said that the other day, and I'm totally stealing it. But it makes sense, it makes perfect sense to me. It's so hard to make a movie, but what's worth having if it's not worth fighting for? And that's why we've got to raise that bar.
Well, it's too much. It's too much hard work,
Right.
not to have it come out.
Not to have it come out
Right.
Good point.
Especially, Shannen, seeing how people who have this real desire and this real need to go out there and and make a touching, lovely film, out of what they had, it's just it's phenomenal.
It is.
It's phenomenal.
You did mention of having God behind the film. If God is behind it, it'll be successful. And I think the flip side also is true. If God, Courageous, for instance, if the Kendrick brothers got their heads big and made this out of ego, it probably wouldn't do as well. But what do you see? How God is behind some of your projects, and what is a good reinforcement, I think, as a filmmaker to say, this, God's got our back, God's behind this.
Supernatural provision.
We had
Of all kinds.
I'll tell the story very quick, but when we were making our first feature, we had written in the script that the man was sitting there reading, and we had written in the script the book of the story of Jonah. In parentheses, we had it in the script. We realized we were, doing all these jobs. Right. We had not mocked up a book and made a book with the story of Jonah. We're shooting in a house. We go, oh my goodness, what do we do? And I just said, well, there were 6 kids who lived in the house. We said, they got to have kids' books. We run to the back. We're looking in their shelves, all these books, and, there's got to be some Bible story book. One of our prayer warriors on the set, she stood there. All the rest of us are looking, and I'm kind of looking over and thinking, well, she should be looking. And she stood there a minute, reached in behind the stack of books, grabbed a book, pulled it out, and she said, here it is. And all it said on the cover was the story of Jonah.
Wow.
And it was like one of those moments that every hair on the back of your neck stands up, and you just go, okay, let's go shoot.
Yeah.
But it was just God saying, I will provide.
Supernatural provision.
Yeah.
There you go. Shannen, I've heard the Kendrick brothers and Michael Catt tell some of those stories.
Oh, yeah.
What may be an experience that you had, particularly on that set of Facing the Giants?
Gosh, there was actually a lot of those. I can tell you one story that I didn't have any problem having kids, so I had to relate to that in Facing the Giants, and I didn't know how I was going to do that next scene.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really prepare for it as far as I knew what I was supposed to do, but I needed to feel it. And the lady that was doing my makeup happened to have issues with having children, and she began to tell me the story of what happened in her life, which made me just walk right out there and felt exactly what she did. I mean, no, not exactly, but I knew that was the Lord that day, because she had not been doing my makeup, and she did that day.
Wow.
So that was supernatural. That was the Lord saying, I will provide this for you.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Kyle, how about you coming, being a brand new filmmaker, you jumping in this? I'm sure there was a lot that was surrounding you.
Yeah.
But what is something that may stick out at you that all of a sudden you just said, this is it?
If I had to pick one, I would say a day where, because we had a small crew, you don't have people to watch equipment and things like that, and your camera's always the most expensive piece most of the time. And for the first time during the shoot, I left it by itself for about half a second. I just turned around to answer a question, and it was at the worst possible moment, and the whole thing tipped over and landed face down in the mud. And we were using an adapter that allows you to put a certain kind of lenses on it and get the depth of field and stuff that the camera itself can't give you. It's got mirrors in it and all sorts of really delicate pieces, and it wasn't working. We tipped it back up and cleaned it off. It wasn't working, and everybody's freaking out. I was freaking out, and I just told everybody, like, go in the house. We're going to pray, and it's going to work. Like, I was just so frustrated that this had happened. I was just not going to believe this was not going to happen. You know, everybody had worked so hard for me, and buying another one of those adapters would have been very difficult.
Yeah.
And we were basically in trouble. But we went inside and we prayed, and everybody figured, yeah, right, you know, I'm sorry. Everybody's putting their hand on my shoulder, and I went out there alone and put my finger on the button, and I just stared at it, and I hit the button, and it whirred right up after everybody had prayed, and I just started laughing and crying all at the same time. Probably looked hysterical, but you know, that was one of those times where God was like, "You can finish your day. This isn't over. Yeah, this isn't over yet." So it was cool.
Jeff,
Yeah.
really quickly, I want to ask you, did you ever have a moment like that, but being in the secular field, that being on maybe the set of, you know, Drop Dead Diva or one of your other shows where you had that moment, that supernatural moment that told you, this is right where I'm supposed to be?
There have been many instances like that. One instance, someone came up to me and flat out asked me, it was in the makeup trailer in the heat of the night years ago, and asked me, who is this Jesus?
Wow.
And I thought, wow, how cool is this? And that was really my first step. That was my first professional TV job. And, you know, really, I guess not to be too generic with it, but for me, just coming from this 7-year-old little boy who had a dream to get in the business right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, you know, I'm old enough that unless you were good friends with Burt Reynolds and you came from the South, you weren't going to get into movie making, you know, and just to have a successful career right now, I thank God every day.
That's
His supernatural hand on my life.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I think one thing that, you know, to walk away from is just to, I hope you, the viewers, got a new view and new respect of the industry, and to take those callings that you have, regardless of it being filmmaking or whatever it may be, but listen to what God is speaking to you, and then when that door opens, don't hesitate, go through it, and God will provide. He is the Lord of provision. And so thank you so much for walking. I do encourage everyone to go and support these filmmakers, your Christian films, your secular films. That's the good, positive message, and, you know, help us change, you know, what we see and how the world sees us. So thank you so much. We're going